In this third episode on the new RSP-Z2 firmware migration, from version 3 to version 4.0, we're going to talk about additional features that are now available on the RSP-Z2 gateway. My name is Carol Hollingsworth. I am the Vice President of Sales for JPS. The presenter today is Iggy Brigado, the Senior Solutions Engineer at JPS. Iggy, one of the more important features that is now available on the RSP-Z2 is the ability to back up and restore. Can you talk about this new feature and why it will be so important to the users of the RSP-Z2?
Yeah, Carol, thanks. Yeah, this is an important new feature in the version 4 upgrade. And again, I just want to reiterate, this is a migration, not an upgrade. So if there are existing RSP-Z2s out in the field that are probably running version 3.15, 3.16, for instance, you need to migrate first to version 4.0. Go to our website, download that migration package for free. There's some instructions on our website how to do that. And then you're now free to upload subsequent 4.1, 4.2 builds into that RSP-Z2, but you got to migrate first from 3.0 to 4.0, and in fact, we have a new build coming out in a few weeks. So Carol, yeah, we talked about a lot of important features, and this happens to be one of them, one of my favorite new features. And let's just go ahead and dive right in. And as you can see, my RSP-Z2 desktop here, I'm in a configuration that we call custom, and we talked about that earlier in one of our previous webcasts. But you know, this also holds true for all the other previous configurations. For instance, the traditional cross connect, very simple, a independent pass-through configuration, or the cross connect with a digital backhaul. But I prefer using the custom configuration. Doesn't matter. You have all that type of selectivity when you deploy your RSP-Z2. So I've got a configuration here that I might want to use on a day-to-day basis, and this is very important to me. Now we have the ability to save or back up a configuration, not only the nets that you see here, but also configuration. So my particular setup, my standalone RSP-Z2, I do have two radio interfaces. One happens to be a VHF asset here that you see in Net 1. I've got a DMR, a digital protocol, in Net 2. I also have a push-to-talk of a cellular resource sharing communications with my VHF asset in Net 1. And I also have a SIP resource, which we're going to be talking about extensively in our next webcast. We have lots of new SIP enhancements, but I have these two nets, and this is maybe a configuration that's very important to my operation, and I need to save this so I can revert back into a configuration. For instance, if my RSP-Z2 fails, I have to get that repaired, or I install a new RSP-Z2. I want to propagate this configuration into my new RSP-Z2 and be up and running without having to fumble around with the settings. I'm deploying 20 RSP-Z2s in a school district into 20 different campuses. I want to use that same configuration so I don't have to revisit my interface and maybe fumble around with my SIP interfaces. So I'm going to go ahead and save this configuration first of all. And on the basic setting menu on the right, you can see the little hamburger menu on the right. I'm going to go ahead and open that up, and it exposes a lot of different features. And the ones we want to talk about, the backup and restore functionality, we do have a couple buttons that allows us to initiate this process. So let me go ahead and click on the backup icon here. And now this exposes and provides us a review what we want or do not want to back up. So I like this because it gives us a little bit of granularity. And for instance, I might want to toggle off the ability to save those network settings because I don't want to propagate that information into new RSP-Z2s. I want to set that up once I have those RSP-Z2s at their final installation location. I have the ability to easily log into those devices with a known IP address. Then I can provision those once those are at my site. So I can back up my network settings, also back up my links. So as you notice, I had two nets set up, two disparate radio protocols in each of the nets. And I recall I have push-to-talk of a cellular in Net 1 and a SIP resource in Net 2. I can back up as well. I can also back up my custom resource profiles. I'm going to talk about that later in this webcast as well. And we can equate those to templates that we used to save in the ACU controller if we're talking about our legacy gateways. I can also save my SIP configuration, and that's important, especially some of these SIP configurations can be pretty complex. I can also back up my user properties, and that includes login attributes. If I create users, I can save my user roles and their passwords as well. If I look in the second column here, I can also back up my general settings of my gateway, and we'll look at that a little bit more when I do a restore. And I can also back up my resources. So for instance, I have a couple radio resources set up, one for a VHF and a digital protocol, DMR. I want to save those specific attributes that support those radios. I want those to be restored when I need to. So I can go ahead and back up that configuration, which is very important for seamless restoration of my system. I can back up my wide area settings as well as my audio pattern profiles. And finally, we can back up our license keys. And I might want to consider not propagating my licensing keys. I don't want to use the same licensing key. So I might want to go ahead and toggle that off. So I'm going to go ahead and back this configuration up, and it's just that fast. If I look on the right-hand side of my browser, you're going to notice that the backup is successful. Let me go ahead and close this dialog. And if you look at the bottom left-hand corner of my browser, it allows me now to find this backup file, and it will be revealed in my downloads folder. So let's go ahead and take a look at that, and we can see that right now. And this gives me an opportunity to now back up these files. So the extension on this backup file is a JBKP file, and I can even rename that file. And now I've went ahead and renamed my file. I want to put this in a safe location. So let me go ahead and close this dialog, and let me return to our user interface. Let me close my menus. And what I'm going to do here is kind of mix things up. I'm going to go ahead and disband these nets. And maybe I'm going to go ahead and maybe deploy this for a different operation. I'm going to go back to my settings screen, and I'm going to completely change my resources. I'm going to change my radio resource into an RTP resource. I'm going to change my DMR resource into maybe a JPS MCC console. I'm going to change my push-to-talk of a cellular resource. Let's see. Let's do a JPS ROIP interface. And I'm going to get rid of my SIP interface, and I'm going to change that into a JPS bridge protocol. So, which is kind of unique, my configuration. So what I've done here, Carol, is pretty unique. If I go back to my home screen, I have no radio resources. Yeah. And in fact, let me move all my resources into a single net. Kind of an oddball configuration here, but it's going to prove the point that, you know, when I'm done with this configuration, so I'm going to go back to my basic settings panel on the right, open up that menu, and I'm going to click on Restore. And this now allows me to select the configuration that I saved previously. So hopefully I've archived this in a very safe location. This is the configuration that we just saved. I want to restore this particular configuration. And we now have the restore dialog in front of us. And as you notice, we do have a bunch of switches to allow us to select certain parameters that we want to back up. Let me select all. And I still have that toggle functionality. So I can restore my basic system settings, my configurations. I want to restore my resource count, which were originally 4. I also want to restore my nets, as you can see here. I can also restore my monitoring nets, all my profiles, my custom profiles, and my configurations, as well as my import and SIP configurations. Remember, some of those can be complex. You get one parameter wrong, then you're troubleshooting. So I'm going to go ahead and click Restore. And as you can see, it's just that fast. So I look at the dialog and the notification on the upper right-hand corner. It now says I need to restart my system. I can do some changes if I want to, but to commit to the new or the backed up configuration, I'm going to have to reboot. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. All right, so I'm going to log in with my factory default, and there you go. And look at my nets. They have now recovered. I have my 2 nets. All my radio resources are back. My push-to-talk of a cellular resource and my my SIP resources back.
You know, that is an awesome feature. The backup and restore, I'm confident that that's one of the new features that's going to be used most often by our customers. Nikki, can you talk about any other unique features that the new version 4.0 firmware brings to the RSP-Z2?
Yeah, absolutely. Carol, yeah, I don't want to talk too much because, like I said before, we can talk all day about the new version 4.0. But there's one that's unique, and since we're in the settings page of the RSP-Z2, I'm going to click on settings here. And so, as you know, in some of my tiles, I do have one of my interfaces on my dual channel gateway set as a radio interface. And what's interesting about the provisioning of these radio interfaces is that all these parameters have to be specific to the model donor radio that I'm supporting. So if I'm supporting a Motorola radio, it's going to be different than a Harris radio or an ICOM radio or a Kenwood radio. So in the past, we were able to load what we call templates, and we did this in the ACU controller application, if you remember, when we were dealing with ACU-1000s, ACU-2000s, ACU-Ms, and ACU-Ts, and this allowed us to load known templates that are with respect to a specific model of radio that I want to interface with. We do something very similar, but we call those profiles in the Z product line. And you can see a little text box where I can perform a word search. So if I want to enter, for instance, I'm going to enter ICOM. And now this reveals all the ICOM radios that we can support. One column has the radio interface cable part number and some descriptions regarding the model radio that we can support. And you're going to notice that I have not committed that setting. I'm going to have to either save that setting or cancel that back out. This word search is very important because I can now, for instance, if I want to support a specific radio like a ICOM radio, I might enter an Alpha 110. That's a unique radio. It's an aviation style radio. There is a warning again on the left-hand side of the column telling me that I need to review the application note because there's probably some modifications I need to do to that radio. That could also include physical modifications or programming to that radio. It's a great feature. We can load these different profiles again with respect to the model radio that we're trying to support in terms of the donor radio. There is a subcategory under settings, and it's called profiles. So let's take a look at that. And this is a different way of searching, doing a word search on an interface. So I can, for instance, if I want to look for a Harris radio, an XG variety radio. Again, I have all the information in front of me to do that, perform that search. Again, I have that warning here that tells me, hey, I need to check out this possibility of having to modify my radio's programming or do physical modifications to that radio. I can also create profiles on my own. So let me click on this row. It now exposes all the settings that are related to that radio. So this is a factory configuration, this particular one that we see here. I cannot delete it or add or delete devices or change any of those patterns, but I can clone the profile. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Clone Profile. And now this gives me an opportunity to delete radios, change certain settings in my digital signal processor, or even name those profiles. All right, so let me go ahead and go back. And I actually saved a couple profiles earlier, and I've got, let me check out what I've got here. I typed in FEMA for my word search, and this happens to be a FEMA configuration. There's the description as well. So let me go ahead and select that. And again, I can add description, and I can propagate that into my resource. So let me go ahead and do that search for my first interface. Type in FEMA, did my word search, and that's my configuration that I use at this FEMA exercise, and I can go ahead and save and commit that setting. And if I want to revert back, remember I've saved my configuration from before, and I can bounce back. So really, Carol, a pretty awesome feature to load these profiles. And what's interesting about the profiles is, let me go to the website. I just want to show you what we're doing on the website. If we go to the products link on our website, we do have a ability to select and a query for cables. Let me go ahead and click on that. And we can perform the same word search on our website for our over 300 varieties of cables. Again, I can do that word search. Let me do look for that XG version of that radio. my Harris, and we have very pertinent columns here. Not only the model number, if that radio is that donor radio is portable or mobile, obviously some notes about the I/O on that radio, and we also notify you whether you need to program the radio or perform hardware modifications. In this particular cable, you do have to perform modifications, and you can download that application now. So here's an example of that particular application now for that XG100. As you can see, these are all the radios we can support, the radio modifications, the physical modifications, and this requires an option cable from Harris. You can order that cable, that option cable from Harris. You can see the part number there. And we also have radio programming suggestions here as well. So take advantage of that. And internally at JPS, we are building a database where we can propagate that information not only to the website to support our cable finder, but also into our hardware and all subsequent firmware builds for RSP-Z2s, ACU-Z1s, and controllers. We're going to have that information for our customers. So it's all about convenience, right? Right, Carol?
It is. You know, Iggy, this new version 4.0 firmware migration for the RSP-Z2 has brought many new features and opportunities for the users of the RSP-Z2. We've now covered most of these new features over 3 brief webcasts. In the short time that we have left, can you please summarize these features for us?
Ooh. Yeah, if I can remember. I think the first major feature we talked about was what you actually see here on my screen is that custom configuration. Gives us a lot of variation, and one of the things we were not able to do with our previous build was to monitor in this custom configuration. So just to briefly look at our previous configurations is we can do the simple cross connection, we can do a cross connect with a backhaul or independent pass-through. And so for those standalone applications, these are great configurations, and that's probably all you need. But if you're going to build out a system that is what we call a wide area distributed system, you're going to need to go into this custom configuration that you see here on the screen. And this is something we're going to talk about extensively in our upcoming webcast, wide area distributed architecture. If I go to my settings screen, one of the features we talked about, Carol, was also the ability to use what we call adaptive transmit delay. And we can still use transmit delay to buffer the transmit audio, the outbound audio, going to be transmitted out to the field. We do that to mitigate the loss of the first few syllables or words in the audio stream. But if we see here under transmit delay, we have now these adaptive processes, and one happens to be audio pattern, and the other is the busy channel. And both of those are looking for tonality coming from our donor radio. So we can now key on, for instance, the permit to talk tone from the donor radio and start filling our buffers until we hear that permit to talk tone. And if we get a busy on that trunk channel, we can still continue buffering the audio. And if we want, we can do a rekey and hopefully gain access to the channel. So really awesome feature as well. So I don't know if we're running out of time, Carol. Obviously we went over, but there's one other thing I want to talk about, and it's going to be here under the help menu. And under the help menu, it gives us the opportunity to download logs. Downloading logs and sending those to the factory, allowing us to look at these logs, helps us to improve our processes and the product itself. But, in the past, 3.15, 3.6, the 3. Version of the software required us to download logs using a memory stick or a thumb drive, insert that into the interface, the USB interface of the RSP-Z2. You power cycle the RSP-Z2 and you dump the logs into the USB stick. You then take those files and email those to customer support, and we can distribute that information. If I take my example of a school district that has 20 schools, or a manufacturing or distribution company that has many facilities with many different RSP-Z2s in different states, and I needed to download logs from all those RSP-Z2s, I have to physically, in version 3, physically touch every one of these RSP-Z2s. So that is very inconvenient. So if I look at my screen here and particularly go to the help menu, I can download logs. And so let me go ahead and click download logs. And now I can download those logs remotely All right, so this gives me the opportunity to download these logs. And if you can see down in the bottom left-hand corner of my browser, those log files end up in my downloads folder. So let's go take a look what that looks like. I'm going to show the folder. And there you can see it in my downloads folder is my my log file. It's called the JPS log file. Go ahead and email that to us. Really very important. And we can now download these files remotely. It's really a kind of a convenience thing. And so, yeah, Carol, let me just show you again where we can access the ability to download the logs. Again, it's under the help menu, as you can see here.
Yeah. Are there any other features left in there that we need to take a look at today, Iggy?
Oh yeah, there's a lot here. Yeah. Okay, since we're in here, let's just take a real quick look. I know we're running out of time, but one of the first things I want to look at here is this first selection. It's called a product tour. This is great. You can download it or view it locally on your computer. But this is an example of that product tour guide, and it talks about all the features. It's great for some of our dealers or customers. You might want to share this file with some of your colleagues, and it talks about a lot of the features and capabilities of the RSP-Z2. One of the other things we can look at in terms of what's under the help menu, a lot of installation and optimization guides, audio optimization, but also one thing that's I really like personally is the ability to view the release notes. And these release notes are going to change every time you download a new update. So we got 4.1 coming pretty soon. When I download 4.1, I'm going to see the new features that are to be expected in that release. So let me click on the release notes, and you can see this is awesome. We can see all the new features that have been added with respect to that build. So Carol, I think we've gone way over time again, as usual. That's what we like doing.
Yeah, thank you so much, Iggy. Yeah, we'll get the that fourth brief webcast scheduled very soon, and get the announcement out to everyone. Again, we're running short of time today. There's just so much information to cover in a brief period of time. Thank you so much for being with us.
All right, take care, everybody. See you next time.